This video is sponsored by Lost in Cult. Silent Hill is a series I've come to love more and more with every entry I play. I've made my way through all of Team Silent's titles, documenting most of my experience on this channel already, so it's about time I dive into the games developed by Western studios. As I looked at my selection, one in particular caught my attention, a Silent Hill game that changed almost everything. Silent Hill Shattered Memories is the first and only game in the series to have been developed for the Nintendo Wii. It would be the only one developed for a Nintendo platform in general, but how could I ignore the visual novel on the Game Boy Advance? For a game franchise that has been almost synonymous with PlayStation, this surprising shift to the Nintendo Wii came with a drastic overhaul of traditional Silent Hill gameplay, as well as the consideration of the more casual gamers. It was developed by Climax Studios, and originally released in 2009 for the platform. However, subsequent releases for the PlayStation 2 and PSP were brought out the following year to maximize sales. Being a Wii game, Shattered Memories introduced a control style completely new to Silent Hill fans, utilizing the Wiimote to its full potential as you pull out locks and shake keys out of beer cans. These actions are arguably uninspiring to watch someone else do, but as the player, the interactivity is gratifyingly kinetic. What would be a simple press of the X button in any other Silent Hill game becomes a WarioWare-like microgame here. And for anyone who is as nostalgic for the Wii as I am, it's an experience that still feels good to play even if the puzzles themselves don't require much brainpower. Most controversially, Shattered Memories removed combat, a feature that was present in every previous Silent Hill entry. Nowadays, combatless horror games with a focus on exploration are more popular than ever, but it's worth mentioning Shattered Memories came out before Amnesia propelled the rise of the genre. And unsurprisingly, this gameplay shift combined with the emphasis on the Wii platform was not met with that much enthusiasm from the fanbase and critics at the time. Yet the game's most distinct feature doesn't even come from any of what I've discussed already, but from the game's inclusion of psychological profiling.
I'm glad you came. Just turning up shows your commitment to the process.
This profiling system would watch and record the player's every action and dialogue choice, then mold certain elements of the game into an experience specifically based on the player, not just the endings. Other Silent Hill games have insinuated that the town's appearance is different for everyone, warping itself into a personal hell for its victims. So the concept of psychologically profiling the player not only fits what previous titles have suggested, but is also just a really damn good idea for a game. Shattered Memories is dependent on the original PlayStation entry more than anything, as the story is a reimagining of the one that started it all. We see characters from the first game adapted to fit into this alternate story, with some being more unrecognizable than others in design, personality, or role, providing yet another subject of contention with Silent Hill veterans back then. If you're not too familiar with Silent Hill games outside of the first 4 numbered titles, you may think that PT was the first to really push the boundaries of expectations for a title in the series. But having now played Shattered Memories, I believe it provided just as much innovation, so much so that compared to the previous entries in the series, it would be easy to mistake it for a completely different series due to its deviations in gameplay, story, and visuals. But at the heart of it lies a dynamic experience that I believe actually fits Silent Hill perfectly. Both game designer Sam Barlow and producer Tom Hewlett have kindly answered some questions I had regarding the making of Shattered Memories, so I'll have their thoughts and experience included throughout this video. A huge thank you to the both of them for taking the time to be a part of this. After Silent Hill Origins was released in 2007, Konami agreed to place another game in the hands of the Portsmouth-based Climax Studios. By their own admission, Origins was a challenge for the team, who had the troubled project handed to them by Konami as Climax's US studio had completely butchered the vision and tone, to the point where it was apparently supposed to be a dark comedy.
Can you get me back to my truck? Here we go again.
The British team had to pick up the pieces for Origins, practically starting from scratch while still having to keep to the same deadline and budget previously set. The script was completely rewritten by Sam Barlow, who also redesigned the levels and creatures in only a week. I honestly don't know how Climax managed to release a working product at all, so learning that made me look at Origins a lot more favourably. The Silent Hill movies of the late 2000s welcomed a new casual audience to the franchise, and combined with the Nintendo Wii being rightfully predicted as an overwhelmingly popular home console at the time even for casual gamers, Konami hoped that releasing a Silent Hill for the platform would reach this new fanbase as well as the core community. As discussions for the next Silent Hill began, the series' US producer William Ortel was pushing to make a first-person shooter on the Wii, and had Climax create a pitch for it. This ended up being Brahms PD, a spin-off involving a police detective searching for their missing partner. While it was probably for the best that this pitch didn't get Konami's approval, one important thing came from this pre-development process. That being the idea of using in-game psychiatry sessions to analyze the player's personality, and having the game's content respond appropriately, manufacturing a personalized nightmare for each player. After the failure of the Brahms PD concept, Climax took another swing with their pitch for Silent Hill Cold Heart. This game would feature a university student named Jessica, who is plagued by nightmares and mental instability. She decides to go on a trip to try to help get some time away from her troubles. But on her way, she's caught in a snowstorm, and unwittingly ends up in Silent Hill while looking for shelter. Signaled by the game's title, the series' typical foggy environment is now a frozen landscape. Cold Heart had a much more traditional Silent Hill approach to combat and inventory, though with its focus on the Wii platform, icy world and psychological profiling, it served as the basis for Climax's next pitch for their own Silent Hill game. Prior to Origins being released, Konami had greenlit the concept of a remake of the original PlayStation game. This gave the team at Climax an opportunity to package their new Wii title as a Silent Hill reimagining, thus getting their project Shattered Memories approved and ready to start officially developing, this time with full control from start to finish.
As soon as I read the pitch with the psych profiling and how it would change the game world, I instantly, if slightly presumptuously, demanded to produce the game. This was the type of outside-the-box thinking that I felt suited Silent Hill as a brand, but could also drive it forward with new innovations that would surprise players. Management granted my request, and I made it my personal mission to protect this feature from outside meddling, and to evangelize it across Konami.
While Origins intentionally followed the formula of the previous Silent Hill entries, Shattered Memories sought to do something completely different, while still retaining a faithful atmospheric approach. The fact that this was a reimagining meant they could appeal to newcomers to the series with no prerequisites for knowledge of previous titles, but they could also include enough references that veteran fans would find meaningful. In line with this, Konami directly requested that there be a version of Sybil that resembles the original game and movie character. For a Wii game, Shattered Memories is one of the more visually impressive additions to the platform's library, and feels like something that would be on the more powerful PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360. The team built a 3D engine themselves, with lighting being one of the more advanced pieces of tech for the Wii. Every object, character, and even snowflakes are individually illuminated by the flashlight, and cast their own shadows. Along with the impressive lighting, Shattered Memories is an almost seamless experience, with no loading screens to obstruct your movement through doors. The act of opening them is tied closely to the player's movement on the analog stick, making it possible to slowly peek through gaps with a first-person view to see what lies ahead. This provides a sense of unease in itself, and I was always anxiously waiting for something to jump out at me during these segments. In fact, Shattered Memories was internally called Project Doors, presumably due to this mechanic. Much like your own unimpeded traversal through doorways, enemies are also able to follow you across entire locations, forcing you to barge into rooms or areas you haven't had time to cautiously scout. In regards to further integration with the Wii's capabilities, There were other ideas Sam Barlow spoke of which ultimately didn't make the cut.
We really wanted to do some stuff where we pulled in the player's Me data, or tapped into the local weather/time for their console. But all those things ended up being things that would have possibly upset the Nintendo guidelines, so we kinda skipped over those. We wanted to find as many ways we could make the player feel seen, and add the feeling that the Harry they were making was tied to them.
Despite innovative gameplay and an exciting new direction for their entry, projected sales for the Wii version of Shattered Memories weren't too promising, and so Konami decided that a PS2 release would be necessary to help recoup their financial investment. However, the controls and features the Wiimote offered were integral to Shattered Memories' core experience. So the PS2 and PSP versions were essentially a frustrating compromise of the team's initial innovative vision. A release the team would have passed on had the decision been left in their hands. For the primary Wii version of the game, however, the team had a chance to flex their creative muscles and make something wholly their own. Lead designer and writer Sam Barlow was keen on making the game as immersive as possible, with a lot of the gameplay and user interface elements reflecting that focus. Most obvious are the motion controls, using the Wiimote for actions such as nodding your head in response to questions or interacting with windows or puzzle contraptions. These actions are almost always translated into actual bodily movements, no matter how trivial the task. The Wiimote also functions as the staple Silent Hill flashlight, as well as playing radio static as a warning of the direction and proximity of dangers or collectibles if you point towards them. Even looking at certain objects like posters or graffiti will prompt a verbal response from Harry.
Nice dress.
Outside of Harry's trusty flashlight, another piece of equipment that the player will heavily rely on is his mobile phone. This item is key in bringing out the most out of the numerous exploration sections of the game, and will allow you to uncover echo messages, which are found in places marked by strong emotions or events. To unravel these moments, you use your phone's camera to take a photo of these spots, translating the sight of hazy ghost-like figures into digital images as if they're right in front of you. Although it's worth noting other echoes will unlock if you simply approach certain places marked by your Wiimote's radio static. Both types of echoes will prompt a voicemail or text message to be sent to your phone, revealing additional story and lore fragments in a wonderfully contextualized format. Hilariously though, there were some instances that the game's vision needed some protection.
My most frustrating presentation was showing the game in its alpha state to the head of marketing. I was showing him the memento you get from the dartboard in the bar, and how you could turn it around to view it using the Wii remote. He got really fixated on the dartboard and tried convincing me we should spend the rest of development making darts playable. People lose all kinds of time in GTA playing darts and stuff. He was relentless. I kept trying to explain the player's mindset in a horror game is different than in GTA, but he kept pushing. Needless to say, we did not make darts playable.
While examining your environments or confronting specific puzzles, you come across phone numbers you can dial. You can even call the Konami customer support line, and Tom Hewlett's wife, who was head of customer support at the time, will answer the phone.
Thank you for calling Konami customer support. How may I assist you today? Hello? Hello? Our caller ID shows that you're calling from Silent Hill. I regret to inform you that you are beyond even our help.
You can also use your phone's GPS to look at the map and find your way. During chase sequences, its functionality is extended by allowing you to draw possible routes through the levels and also view a path of where you've already been. This was surprisingly useful to me because I have an awful sense of direction and was actually running in circles for longer than I'd like to admit. But the possible paths through these levels, even if visited before in the safe segments of the game, change once frozen over, blocking previously accessible passages and creating a labyrinth. Although less of a necessity than the other uses I've discussed, you can also change your phone's ringtone, or even become the world's greatest liminal space photographer. When it came to the game's chase sequences, the team were inspired by the primal fear of being hunted. After all, a classic nightmare involves being frantically pursued, not bravely overcoming your enemies with a steel pipe. At the beginning, Climax were thinking of including some traditional weapons like knives, which would be scattered throughout the environment though infrequently. They ultimately decided against it, as players would instinctively engage in combat, breaking the nerve-wracking atmosphere of desperately trying to escape a labyrinth where you're the prey. As a compromise, they ended up inserting flares, which would act as a temporary defense against the oncoming herd of Rorschachs scrambling their way towards you. These enemies will cling onto Harry, slowing down his movement and ultimately bringing him down should he get overwhelmed by too many of them. This is another case where the Wiimote will come in, as you need to swing your controller in the direction of where you've been grabbed in order to push off your assailant. Even with this focus on the fresh gameplay actions, the focal point of this entry was always intended to be its story. Storytelling was the first consideration while laying out plot and gameplay ideas, and finding unique ways of delivering a narrative that are only possible in video games was something important to the team. It was crucial, therefore, that every player, regardless of skill, had the ability to reach the end of the Shattered Memories experience. If the player struggles too much during combat sequences, enemy AI is kicked down a notch, giving them a better chance at passing these sections thanks to dynamic difficulty. Even during puzzles, all keys or tools needed for a solution would be in the same room, in an attempt to limit possible obstacles to progression even further.
I think if you're going to give players something different, you also need to balance that out with a kind of generosity. You can't ask them to meet you halfway and then keep punishing them. It's also very much a truth that the more you make players repeat things, the more you make them stuck. The more they see the illusion. They start to see the clockwork, the seams of the experience. So it was very important to me that we help players move smoothly through this experience to properly deliver our emotional payload. I think there's definitely a minority who look for a very specific game template and equate difficulty/obfuscation and the resulting padded game time with a kind of survival horror experience. I don't think Shattered Memories was a game for them in that sense. For me, it's all in service of engaging the player. Sometimes a challenge can do that, but the classic survival horror template definitely can also take that too far.
Shattered Memories' most notorious feature was its use of psychological profiling, which is loudly displayed upon starting the game. Originally Sam Barlow's idea, this aspect persisted through the numerous pitches from the first iteration of Brahms PD. Essentially, the game would collect hidden values that change depending on player actions, which would then shape various elements of the game such as character appearances and what buildings are available to visit. It could even directly alter conversations and other characters' responses to your actions, as well as affect the look of the Rorschach enemies. You may think it's only the game's therapy sessions with Dr. Kaufman that affect your profile, as he asks questions and gets you to partake in exercises like sorting images of people between dead or sleeping, or colouring in a drawing of a house. The last exercise being one of my favourites purely because you get to see the colours translated into reality. The site profile will also watch your playstyle during main gameplay too. It will monitor what route you take through a level, if you use exits right away or take your time exploring. Even a choice of entering a women's or men's bathroom will contribute to the profile's values, as well as what you choose to look at and for how long.
Now, the testing that is done by Dr. K accounts for about 25% of the data we have on the player. The rest of the data, the 75% outside of these psych sessions, is taken from watching the player as he plays the game, observing which items the player is interested in, how long he spends looking at them, routes he takes. Does he go straight through this door here, or does he investigate and look around, look for alternative routes? When the player interacts with puzzles, does he do so in an analytical way? Does he just rush in and try and solve things by brute force? Does he sit back and take his time? Is he interested in story-based items, in items to do with facts? Is he interested in sexual imagery in the environment? Does he consult his map often? Does he use the annotation feature on his map?
As such, there are fewer conscious choices to be made by the player, providing they're not already aware of what exactly affects the profiles. since the game watches not only your conversational answers, but also your virtual body language. So I made sure to play the game as authentically to me as possible on the first playthrough, and it was fun to see what ending and changes I would end up with naturally along the way. This gives rise to a great amount of replay value too, including an unlockable UFO ending after beating the game at least once.
Wrong day again?
See you tomorrow, James. One of my couples therapy patients. Haven't seen his wife in a while. Where were we?
Even doing a playthrough as the worst person you could possibly be is enjoyable, even just to see the way the game is tailored to whatever playstyle you've adopted, whether consciously or subconsciously. That's not to say there's a strictly good or bad path, and changes can be small or large. At the end of the day, each player will experience a game unique to them. The all-seeing eye of the profiling system is just as invasive as Dr. Kaufman's questions.
Never cheated on a partner, really?
Providing an uncomfortability of having to surrender intimate information willingly or unwillingly. Seeing things change adds a layer of delusion. It makes you question what is real and what isn't, in true Silent Hill fashion. Whether you like it or not, the game forces you to give up a part of yourself, and meshes that into your own personal experience. Shattered Memories attempts to get under the player's skin to a degree that no other title in the series has done before. When it came to building this system, the team did a lot of research into psychometrics.
We spoke with academics who had done work into eye tracking. We put the team through a battery of personality tests to have some data to work off of. I worked with a therapist who insisted I attended sessions as a patient, and genuinely, in order to make things credible. The most fun, I guess surprising anecdote, is that we were working off the 5-factor personality model, which is the popular one. The 5th factor of the 5 is psychopathy, but we ended up dropping that factor because we found that everyone naturally behaves a bit like a psychopath when playing a game, so it kinda skewed the data.
In regards to more variations, the team had to compromise on the number of possible conclusions the profiling system could generate, with time and money of course being the limiting factor.
We'd go in asking for as much as we could think of, and then end up compromising and picking the key ones. Could always have used more hairstyles, outfits, or set dressing. It was particularly tight on things like monster animations. Those had to be generic, but fit against any additional animation bones, say an udder, rather than be unique to each form. The way they moved could have been a real nice differentiator.
The game has 4 different videotape endings, not to be confused with the 3 possible encounter type endings you receive, which I'll talk a bit about later. The Love Lost ending shows Harry leaving Dahlia and Cheryl, seemingly having amicably broken up. This ending is achieved by being friendly and as much of a family man as possible.
Even though Mom and Dad don't love each other anymore, we both love you. And we always will. Oh, come on.
The Sleaze and Sirens ending, on the other hand, is all about being as sexual as possible, with the final tape displaying Harry sitting on a bed joined by Michelle and Lisa. The Wicked and Weak tape is the one I unlocked on my first playthrough, and shows Harry being berated by a furious and frankly abusive Dahlia. Apparently this ending is acquired by being as unfriendly as possible, including not making eye contact with characters, which to be honest I think was why I got this ending. Also because I think I accidentally gave Lisa the wrong colour pill that she asks for. I just couldn't remember if she said blue or yellow. And finally there's the Drunk Dad ending, which is rather self-explanatory. Just keep staring at alcohol when given the chance.
Be a good girl for Daddy. Go get him another drink, will you? Now, give me a damn beer!
As Shattered Memories is a reimagining of the original game in the series, it is much more than a simple retelling of the same story. In general, it has a mirrored premise, with Harry looking for his daughter Cheryl. Along with its setting in the town of Silent Hill, all of the main characters are back in this installment, albeit some having a wildly different appearance this time around. And even though the game couldn't be more different to the first title in several ways, the team at Climax Studio made sure to look at multiple entries in the series to make something authentic to Silent Hill.
The first Silent Hill game was kind of a miracle and product of a very particular moment in time, so I think a lot of how the original turned out was organic. We certainly wanted to make something that would feel, in a fresh way, like the original felt, rather than rehashing it in a way that would feel like diminishing returns. We wanted to take some of the themes of the first game, and also some of the ideas thrown out by 2 and 3, and take them to a place that was a little more lived in. Like, there was a vibe I got when going through the K. Gordon house in Silent Hill 1 that felt so real and domestic, and it had a real presence. Walking into a domestic living area, that atmosphere of it being abandoned, the proximity of the horror to the domesticity, the uncanny feel. We wanted to tap into that, and to remind people that it was snowing in Silent Hill.
This reimagining approach allowed devs to avoid limitations with lore and previously set characters, but still explore similar themes in a different way. It also gave longtime fans of the games references to pick up on that only they could understand, but not in a way that would diminish the overall experience for newcomers.
I think it was all upside for us. It's great to have something to start with that you can then springboard off of. And a lot of the intent of Shattered Memories was that we would create a weird deja vu for people who had played the original. A sense of things being recognisable but also very different. That was a whole extra level of vibes and emotional responses that we could tap into. This was much more fun than, say, Silent Hill Origins, where it was all downside. There, it felt like we were making fan fiction, having to embellish and add small details to an existing story that had no real spare room or need for those embellishments.
Silent Hill 2 implied the town looks different for each person, with Angela famously saying,
"You see it too. For me, it's always like this."
Shattered Memories used that to explore something a little different, switching the rusty otherworld to a broken, icy landscape, the polar opposite of Angela's fiery prison. The transitions to the otherworld are also worth mentioning as you watch the environment freeze over like a wave of frost. Apart from the visual change, this also brings about a different kind of tension. In the other Silent Hill games, you go into a building or lift or through a door, and there's the otherworld. You'd have a kind of threshold to pass that would then introduce you to the hellscape. In that way, players would mentally prepare themselves for what would lie beyond such a boundary. However, in Shattered Memories, it feels a lot more unpredictable, as you'll get thrown in against your will rather than at your own pace. This establishes even more unrest in the face of the otherworld, especially considering the relentless pursuers of the nightmare sections. Sub-Zero Otherworld aside, there were some new creations that were more difficult to sell to Konami. This included one brand new character named Michelle being added to the core cast. They argued that her character was needed in order to flesh out the story some more, and having at least one entirely new personality would help keep things fresh. Each character in the game that Harry interacts with seems to represent his perspective on certain aspects of his life. Sybil can show his attitude towards authority, Dahlia his view on love and relationships, and perhaps Lisa as a chance to display his caring and protective side. Even Michelle and her partner John could possibly give some insight into Harry's relationship with Dahlia. With all of these characters being women, they also give him an outlet to express his approach to sexuality. But of course, how all of these connections pan out are all dependent on the player. One of the most overt alterations to the narrative and lore of Silent Hill is that there isn't a cult or religious theming. Instead, there is an emphasis purely on the psychological aspect and explorations of characters. The traditional surrealism is ever present in Shattered Memories, as you're often left questioning what was real and what wasn't. You start to wonder if the people you've come across actually exist in the real world, or even if you're walking among the living. While some of the individuals you meet are troubled, some of them aren't, opening up the possibility that perhaps you really are interacting with reality, or that ordinary people have been brought into the otherworld too. With this uncertainty comes the ability to interpret characters in all kinds of ways. For example, maybe Michelle is actually a classmate of Cheryl's, or a symbol of something or someone from Harry's past. Her strange behaviour and sudden disappearances at times makes her seem like she could be an illusion, but it goes without saying you're never given a definite answer. Harry's death feels fairly obvious throughout the game, but never explicitly confronted until the end. It leads you to believe the big twist is going to be something isolated to him, but instead it reveals that we've been acting as Cheryl in the therapy sessions.
You need to live your life, Cheryl.
And the parts in which we play as Harry are a projection, although not confirmed to exist solely within her mind or reality. Dr. Kaufman, previously keeping a suspiciously calm demeanour, explodes in anger, even shattering a glass in the process.
Wake up!
He ensures Cheryl is forced to confront what she has been hiding from.
Your dad wasn't a hero. Wasn't your knight in shining armor. He was a human being. You never knew him, and you never will. The dad walking around in your head isn't even a ghost. He never existed.
There is some foreshadowing at play with the game's intro and elements of the user interface. While the game's phone menu will display anything helpful to Harry's journey, opening the exit and options menu, things explicitly for the player, it will be displayed in the same VHS effect we encounter when starting the game. Now that we know Cheryl is the real narrator, we understand that this outer layer of the interface is representative of her viewpoint. She was the one watching the tape at the start, and she's the one who has been manifesting this version of her father, all hinted at by a menu all along. It's a prime example of an immersive user interface that also manages to be consistent with the storytelling. You realise that Cheryl is watching this tape depicting happier times, but rewinding the recording over and over again at a certain point, as if avoiding what the next scene is. Once you reach the finale of Shattered Memories, there's another recording we see depending on our profile, and is presumably the part of the tape Cheryl was desperately avoiding. Unsurprisingly, the exact contents of this end scene are linked to the player's profile. In the intro, we watch Cheryl obsessively living in a moment that has long since passed, holding on in utter delusion to avoid her harsh reality. Throughout the game, we as Harry visit locations associated with painful events in her life, as if she was hopelessly craving a father figure to have been there to protect her. From Cheryl's turbulent high school experience to stealing and attacking a security guard in Toluca Mall, we see her self-destructive nature in full force. It even affects her bond with her mother, which is directly called out by Dr. Kaufman.
She's not the monster you make her out to be.
She relies on the idea that her father would be able to fix all of these problems, and if he was still around, none of these bad things would have happened to her. Yet it was never about who Harry really was, but rather her idea of who he was or perhaps could have been. The Harry we create with Cheryl never existed. He's not even a ghost, just a coping mechanism. She retreats to an imaginary world where her father is alive and searching for her, and refuses to acknowledge the harm that this destructive long-term grief is causing. It's only at the end we get the chance to see her begin to heal, facing her reality and accepting the fact she'll never get her father back, but realizing her life doesn't have to dwell in the shadow of her loss. The mementos we collect during our playthrough are displayed in a box during a post-credits scene, which is packed up by Cheryl before she walks away from it. A literal presentation of her finally getting closure and moving on, while still keeping those memories intact. Although we question reality throughout the game, we're finally left with something real. Somebody who is able to escape their torment and look ahead to their future. In terms of Silent Hill endings and their emotional impact, Shattered Memories is definitely the one that hit me the hardest. When a close relative passes away, especially when you're quite young or there's been some distance, it's inevitable to imagine what your life might be like if they were still around. Maybe you'd be more confident with a more loving father, or happier with your appearance with a less critical mother. But when that person passes away, so does that possibility of them being what you wanted or needed. You can get caught on that missed opportunity. And even if you weren't close to that person, you mourn the idea of them as opposed to who they really were. And that's the case with the Harry we play as, who also comes to recognize what he is in the end, in a similar vein as Maria in Born from a Wish. Silent Hill gave shape to an ideal with a body and life, but the actual person they're based on is completely different. The town has been heavily influenced by the emotions, fears, and desires of its protagonists throughout the series. James's guilt is the overarching theme of the second game, manifesting Pyramid Head and Maria, for example. Heather's fight for her own body and identity in the third creates creatures and environments reminiscent of childbirth and reproductive organs, or even herself. Shattered Memories, then, is a perfect companion as it delves into grief. The nightmare world of Silent Hill is completely influenced by Cheryl's mental state, which is directly impacted by the player. The relationships to authority, love, and other things that we see Harry form could all in fact be projections from Cheryl's own outlook. Even the enemies are called Rorschachs, which are a play on Rorschach, the name of a projective psychological test where a subject's perceptions of ink blots are analysed. Before we get to watch the final tape ending, Cheryl encounters her version of Harry face on. There are 3 different variants of this meeting, one being her letting go of him, while Harry comforts her saying he'll always be with her before freezing over, solidifying him in her memory. This is achieved by being mostly friendly and family-oriented throughout your playthrough. The second encounter shows Cheryl placing the blame on Harry for her troubled life and the events that led up to it, with him telling her to forget him before he freezes and shatters. This is gained by being extremely unfriendly overall. The third and final possible encounter involves Cheryl clinging to her projection of Harry, saying that the man who died wasn't really her father. Interestingly, this is the only version of this scene where we do not see him freeze over, possibly implying that she continues to live in her fantasy. This is supported by the method of getting this meeting, which is by contradicting yourself during the therapy sessions and acting uninterested in partaking. The icy visuals of the game aren't just for show, as there isn't much that is included in Shattered Memories that doesn't have some thematic or narrative purpose. This is made clear once the credits roll, and also in part to the personal hell idea that the other Silent Hill titles have previously alluded to. Shattered Memories examines family and memory. It explores the physical remnants of memory, but it also shows the non-physical, through its hazy recollections and fragments of what actually happened. It highlights the untrustworthy nature of memory, and how one can become dominated by it. In a 2009 interview with IGN, Barlow mentions that they recalled one of Dr. Kaufman's lines from the original game, commenting on the odd snowy weather for that time of year. That strangeness became a source of inspiration, with a progression from just inexplicable weather to fossilizing the town in an icy grip, bringing nightmares along with it. Neil Williams, lead artist at Climax Studio at the time, further explains this choice to replace the familiar dilapidated otherworld of the previous titles with a contrasting aesthetic.
On Shattered Memories, it was not only important to us that the otherworld had its own unique identity, rather than just aping what had been done so many times before, but also that it directly supported one of the fundamental elements of the narrative: a decaying and increasingly abstracted world encased in a protective shell of impenetrable ice, as direct metaphor for the protagonist's desperate attempts to keep the last vestiges of their fading, fragile memories intact.
During moments where Harry is close to finding out the truth,
"We need to talk. When I was at the station, I pulled the file on Harry Mason."
Cheryl's internal mechanism for hiding within her imagination kicks in, and the world conveniently transitions to ice. But this icy otherworld also has memories of those seemingly unrelated to Cheryl and Harry inhabiting it, with tragic deaths or traumatic events of other people in the town taking root in certain spots. It's as if these bad things have left their mark, and similarly to Cheryl's painful memories, there are other people affected by tragedy too. Perhaps they also cannot let go, but have to hide away the suffering they carry with them. All of these awful moments are suspended in this place like a museum of misery. After I completed my first playthrough of Shattered Memories, I was treated to a scrolling analysis during credits, presented as a report by Dr. Kaufman. Seeing my conscious and subconscious gameplay transcribed into a personality assessment really made me understand how much work went into this profiling system. It wasn't a wholly accurate representation of me, of course, but it was really surprising to see certain parts that were disarmingly precise. As far as video games go, I don't think I've played anything like Shattered Memories. It's a game that even by today's standards would be considered ambitious, and perhaps unbeknownst to players back then, provided innovation to the survival horror genre that was ahead of its time.
I'm very proud that our game was essentially a walking simulator before that term existed, and how favorably it compares to the notable games of that type, when we were charting our course without a map, as it were. I hope Shattered Memories takes some of the credit for expanding what a horror game can be. It was pretty strict beforehand. You had your Resident Evil style action games, and your SH style atmosphere games. That's how the genre was judged. Horror games these days have such a huge range now, and it's wonderful. Weird text-driven meta things, or PS1 throwbacks like Signalis. It's great. Horror only works when it surprises you, so I'm glad it doesn't all fit into too rigid definitions anymore.
Clearly, a lot of what we did in Shattered Memories ended up becoming quite standard. The flight rather than fight gameplay, the sense of open, immersive spaces with no loading, the walking simulator aspects of our storytelling, etc. I couldn't say whether any of that was directly because of Shattered Memories, or just in the water anyway. I have heard some developers call out Shattered Memories, so it does sometimes feel like we had an outsized reaction from particular press, or particular groups of developers, rather than the world at large.
The legacy of Shattered Memories even affected Sam Barlow's future games, including Her Story, Telling Lies, and Immortality, where that use of technology as an immersive interface and even the profiling systems were repurposed and evolved further.
Clearly I have a real interface within an interface thing going on. You could argue that the Principal's Office puzzle is basically Her Story 0.1. I definitely enjoyed the use of the frame narrative and the idea that we had that the player is not the protagonist. The idea that you create tension between the main character and the player, and explore that for dramatic effects. We deliberately kept shifting POV, third to first person, and introduced time jumps to create a disconnect with Harry. Also, a lot of the way the profile system worked, vector math and fuzzy logic underpinning choices rather than binary trees, has been something I've used in every game since. Under the surface, the way that Her Story or Immortality knows about its scenes and connects things, and plays music, etc., is all using a similar setup.
The future of the Silent Hill series looks quite promising, with entries from several different game studios on the horizon. Silent Hill F employs a brand new contrasting visual aesthetic similar to what Shattered Memories did with its ice. And this is just my own speculation, but having played No Code's other titles, I have a feeling their Silent Hill will focus on the more tactile mechanics, like perhaps doing something different with the radio, in a similar way that Shattered Memories uses the phone and making it a core part of gameplay. Even if you take a look at PT, its use of non-Euclidean domestic environments can be traced back to Shattered Memories' late game Nowhere section, where doorways and corridors would loop in ways that defy reality. And of course, both games share an absence of combat. In this way, it's really eye-opening to see these shadows of Shattered Memories creep their way into future titles, even within its own series, despite not being as talked about online as some of the other games. Some people say Shattered Memories would have been better if it weren't a Silent Hill game, or if it weren't developed with the Wii in mind. But if either of those were the case, this game quite literally could not exist. It's a game that is completely dependent on its platform, and the opportunities that were provided for the developers as a reimagining. It may have done better commercially, But for players that go into the game with an open mind, it has a high chance of leaving an unforgettable mark. I mean, where else do you get to move a controller as if you're swimming or making an escape in a wheelchair? It's fun to do these goofy movements. It's fun to see all the references to the previous games. And it's fun to see what profile you get, and what Dr. Kaufman reveals about your personality that you might prefer to keep hidden. And even without all of that, you still get to experience a psychologically poignant and moving story. I couldn't be happier that I gave it a chance. Now for a word from today's sponsor, Lost in Cult. Creative studio Lost in Cult are currently running funding campaigns for 2 massive new book projects. The first is Citizen Sleeper Design Works, which includes an official art book exploring the hit indie sci-fi video game. Alongside this, Lost in Cult are publishing a fully fledged solo tabletop RPG called Cycles of the Eye, created by Gareth Damian Martin in collaboration with designer Alfred Valley, that pulls you into the universe of Citizen Sleeper. You can buy the art book and tabletop games separately or together as part of the stunning deluxe or all-in-one anniversary editions, available only during this limited funding campaign. Deluxe and Anniversary editions include custom dice for the tabletop game, a special deck of tarot cards with foil detailing, and a set of in-world iron-on patches. All of this housed within a deluxe box with metallic finish and a magnetic clasp. There's even a vinyl record and art prints included with the Anniversary edition. The funding campaign ends on July 2nd, shipping Q1 next year. The second related book project from the creator of Citizen Sleeper, Gareth Damian Martin, is the beautiful Heterotopia's Archive. Lost in Cult are bringing issues 1 to 3 of this incisive digital architecture and game spaces zine to print. Issues are available as standalone releases, or as part of the deluxe edition, which bundles the books together with an exclusive additional volume of studies, all encased within a high-end slipcase. If you love video game architecture and virtual environments, this is the book for you. Campaign ends soon on June 13th, with the deluxe edition only available to buy for a few more weeks. The Heterotopia's Archives will be shipping at the end of this year. Thanks again to Lost in Cult for sponsoring this video. As a final note, I'll put a link to my interview with Sam Barlow and Tom Hewlett in the description, since I wasn't able to include some of their answers in this video, and they said some really interesting stuff that you should go and read. A huge thank you to them both for their participation, as well as the creators who kindly supplied their voices for quotes. They all make great content, so make sure to go check out their channels after this. And of course, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you hopefully soon with another video that I won't triple the scope of and take months making. Maybe.